The first customization trick we want to talk about is how to define your own custom configuration keys. For example, if we head over to our config directory, there Laravel provides us with a lot of default configuration files, and in each of these configuration files we have configuration keys. Now, how do you define yours if you want to use them in your application? So let's say, for example, you're building an application and you actually want to set a key to define the developers that actually develop that application. A good place to place that is going to be in your app.php, where we have the name of the application, time zone, URL, and all of that. Therefore, right down at the bottom, you might want to actually have a key that says, here are the owners or developers of this application. This is just an array, and what you can do is actually define your own specific key. Therefore, right down before we have our array of Laravel providers, I'm going to put in a key immediately after log level, and this key is going to be developers. And like I said, this is an array, therefore you can actually have a nested array in here, or you can have a string or whatever you want to have. In this case, I'm going to have a nested array, and this nested array is going to be an array of developers. Therefore, we can have friends@kati.com, which is the email of one of the developers, and you can have multiple developers. Now, let's say in a part of your application, you actually want to display the developers that develop the application. I'm going to head over to my web.php, and we're going to see how this works. Just like any other configuration that Laravel provides for us, you can go ahead and reference that particular key in the configs, and Laravel is automatically going to get it for you. So I'm going to define a new route, and I'm going to pass in a closure here. And in this closure, we're going to simply die dump a config value. Using the config helper that Laravel provides for us, we can reference the file, which is automatically referenced from the config directory, and we can say, in this config directory, get me the app.php, which would reference with this. And then for us to get this particular key, we simply need to reference it using a period. So app.developers, and Laravel is automatically going to return to us this array. So let's go ahead and visit that route and see what we get. We visit the custom route, and sure enough, we have that array that Laravel returns to us. Therefore, everywhere in your application where you need to reference this value, you can use Laravel's helper method. Another thing we want to talk about is actually having personal configuration files. For example, if you're working on a project, you might want to have everything that concerns configurations for that project in a particular configuration file. Now, how do you do this? Most people actually resort in saving these values or settings into the database. Meanwhile, a simple custom configuration file will do the trick. Let's go ahead and see how this works. I'm going to create a new file in the config directory, and let's say we're building a block. So I'm going to call this a block.php, and here we have this file. Remember, it's just a PHP file that returns an array. So return an array. Now, automatically, if we want to fetch this file, we need to get the config helper, the block, and then we can pass in whatever keys we want to save here. So for example, this is something that I do in most of my projects. If I have a project that needs just one or just two administrators, then I'm going to have a configuration file, custom configuration file for that project, and I'm going to have a key there that says administrators, and then I'm going to pass in an array for the emails for those administrators, and then those administrators are just going to have normal accounts in my database. Therefore, let's say I want friends@kati.com to be an administrator, and maybe I want friends@me.com also to be an administrator. Let's just say different emails for different users. What I'm gonna do now is go to any part of my application and then reference this custom configuration file and this custom configuration key, and I can get this array. So this is mostly useful if you want to have maybe an administration middleware, but you don't necessarily want to have an administrators table that knows who is administrator or not. So let's head over back to our config route and see if we can get this value. Remember, we need to go to the file, which is block, and we need to get that particular key, which was administrators. Okay, so let's see if Laravel is going to give this to us. Refresh, and there we go. Laravel gives us that exact same array. So now we see the amount of flexibility that Laravel gives us with our configurations. Now let's talk about our default.env file. Most people are scared of actually touching this file, but Laravel simply gets these values in the configurations. Therefore, you can actually define your own custom configurations in this .env file. Now let's go ahead and see an example. Let's say we want to actually define creator or app creator for this application, and I'm gonna set that to me. So I'm gonna say friends@me.com to be the email of the creator of the application. Now when I define this constant, anywhere in my application, I can actually get it. For example, if I head to my web.php, I pull out this config helper and I reference env, I can get app creator, and this env method is simply going to get that configuration environment variable. So if I head over to my browser, quick refresh, there it gives me that exact string. But Laravel does something behind the scenes for us. It has a cache for the configurations. Therefore, referencing env is actually skipping Laravel's configuration. You don't want to do this in your project. For example, using env in views or env in your route file or controllers, it's really gonna slow down your application because all the time it's going to go into the environment and try to get this value. Okay, what you want to do rather is to have a custom configuration key. Now that we have our block.php, we can have another key that says creator, and we can call our env method and would reference the app creator key. Okay, and what happens is, since it's in a configuration file, Laravel is automatically gonna cache this value. So every time you need it, you just reference the config method and it's gonna get it from cache if it exists. Okay, so now rather than referencing env, we want to reference config for the config block file dot creator key. Okay, quick refresh to see what we have. And we have the exact same thing. But now the advantage is this value has been cached and our application is actually going to give us that faster, as you can see. So we've gone through 4 major configurations. First, we should be able to define our own custom keys in any of the configuration files that we have. Second, we should also be able to create our own custom configuration files in our applications. Third, we should also be able to create our own custom env keys, which we can reference from any of the configuration files. And most importantly, we remember never to use the env file in our applications directly, but we should actually reference Laravel's configuration, which is going to do the caching for us.